So we're now on our third episode of talking about worship, and worship is really complex, and yet it is really important. And I think we spend too much time speaking about worship in superficial terms, which is why we are now in our third episode, a full hour plus of conversing about what is worship supposed to look like for the believer in the New Testament church today. My name is Dan Burrell. I'm one of the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship in suburban Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm joined today by Life Fellowship worship pastor Jason Lanier, who is one of the smartest guys I know on this topic and many others. And we're also joined by Josh Brom, who is our producer and a musician of his own right and skill set. Guys, thanks a lot for joining us here today. And I've got my gun fully loaded. I've got, I know my time here, and I really would like to have about 27 more episodes on this topic, but time prevents that. However, what I kind of want to talk about is, as I mentioned, this is part of a series we visit periodically at Life Fellowship that deals with the value we have of ancient future, having respect for our past, our heritage, our traditions, and so forth, and yet putting them in a context that is more contemporary. The fact that, Generation Z does things a lot differently than they did at the beginning of the church. We have technology that they did not have that existed even 50 years ago, let alone hundreds of years ago or even thousands of years ago. But let's go back even to Scripture. And would you do some compare and contrast between Old Testament worship and New Testament worship for us? Because Old Testament worship obviously was a different type of assembly. It was largely gathered around the nation of Israel. It involved first a tabernacle, then a temple. The temple wasn't always there. And so sometimes it had to be worship from the home because they kept getting destroyed. But then when Jesus came and, he had this good conversation with Peter and he said, look, I'm the cornerstone and I'm going to be building this church. And we are called the church, the called out assembly, the ecclesia. We are also called the family of God. We're also called the bride of Christ. All those have implications. So, and then touch on, if you inspired to do so, on what we have become now 2,000 years into church history. So, at the end of Acts, we pretty well have a picture of what the early church looked like, but they were gathering in homes and small halls and catacombs and, odd. And you and I both have traveled Europe extensively. We know the great cathedrals of the world. And some of those things about the cathedrals were great and some were not so great. So let's just kind of talk about, and now we live in the age of the universal black box. But, you go to New England, you see the little white church clapboard buildings. You go to the South, you see the Southern Baptist rifle barrel pillars on the front, steeple on the top. So, it's not just about the architecture, but the architecture matters.
Right.
So let's just kind of have a freewheeling conversation as we tend to do. So
let's very freewheeling.
Let's start with Old Testament, New Testament.
Well, again, I want to preface any of my answers to your very good questions with I did not go to seminary. And so
that's a plus. You keep saying that like that's a negative. That's a plus.
Well, I feel that I'm at a deficit many times to explore topics like this because I'm still very much learning as a worship. I've been leading worship. Even that phrase kind of sticks in my throat, saying I'm leading worship. But anyway.
It is what it is, right?
It is what it is. I've been in worship ministry for 30 years. So Old Testament worship versus New Testament worship. I'm not sure that Old Testament and New Testament, and you tell me this, you answer this for me. The words Old Testament and the words New Testament, those are not considered inspired words, right? That's just our categorical.
That's how we categorize.
That's how we categorize really what's more technically accurate, Old Covenant, New Covenant, right? So we've got two covenants, but one God. Mm-hmm. So when we approach this Old Covenant worship, New Covenant worship, were you asking what are the differences?
Yeah, what are the similarities?
Okay.
Because, when God places himself as the center of our worship, that doesn't change whether we were in the garden with Adam and Eve or whether we were in the tabernacle in the wilderness or,
Exactly. And so Old Covenant, New Covenant, all part of the same story and all the story of the same God. Yeah. So Old Testament worship was progressively place specific. So before, in the garden, just worship was in its purest simple when Adam and Eve were in communion and fellowship with God.
Very presence of God.
The very presence of God. They had worship that we can only imagine right now, informed by scriptures and prophecy, that we too will enjoy one day. But the garden was the church. Adam and Eve were the priest. And God was, as He is now, the object of worship. But then they moved into to a tent, a very complicated tent, very fancy tent. I don't think we should think of it like my tent I take camping up at the New River State Park, like
the one you got at Walmart.
Yeah, we weren't going to go buy that thing at Walmart, no doubt. And then it moved into a temple. But place was so important, not just to the people, but place was important to God. The way it looked, He designed it. He told them. He designed the garden in which He and Adam and Eve were going to commune together. He designed that before He put Adam and Eve in it. This is where we're going to worship with one another, and He designed it. He designed the tent. He also designed the temple, and it was so important to Him that it be built for His purposes and His expectations and the way He envisioned. He told David, "You can design it, but you can't build it. It's too important. You're important. Jesus is going to come through your line, but your son Solomon's going to build it." So Old Testament was very much about meeting God in a place. And then New Testament, of course, turned that kind of upside down. And I feel like even though it turned it upside down, it did not ever say that the ways of the Old Testament were not connected to God's values and expectations, His desires, and the manner in which we were to worship. But we've kind of took it that way. I hear often from peers, we need to get back to the Church of Acts. We need to be just like that church. We need to be gathering in small places, et cetera. And, I don't dislike that or detest that, but I'm like, you do remember that in the beginning of the Old Testament, they were gathering in small places too. They were tents and shepherd fields and
tombs.
Yeah,
a lot of times.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
actually,
Yeah, it's things.
some things that we don't want to re-emulate.
Yeah, exactly. The way God created creation to work is living things grow. And so they grew from tiny homes into these beautiful cathedrals. And the cathedrals really weren't that different in purpose from the temple, in that the cathedral was to tell the story of the gospel. So you walk into these cathedrals, there is no doubt in your mind you're in a sacred place.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It's very, very, very clear. The place still transformed your thought. I didn't have to hear a single person speak. When I visit cathedrals in Europe, no one has to speak to me for my thoughts to be transformed as soon as I walk into that place. I see the stained glass. I see the icons. I see the sheer size and enormity and complexity and elegance of the place. It's very different from a Dunkin' Donuts. I walk into Dunkin' Donuts, I don't have that kind of reaction. I walk into Dunkin' Donuts, I'm anxious. I need to make a decision. I want to know what I want to eat, and I want to get out of there. I don't want to interact with the cashier, et cetera. I walk into a cathedral, and there's no anxiety. There's a gravity to the place, just the place. And so I think that's a bridge to Old Testament and New Testament worship.
I wonder how much, just to jump in, I wonder how much of this is a matter of like we're recognizing maybe a dearth of intentionality in the architecture.
Oh, for sure.
Certainly there's these really cool things about stained glass and things like that, and we can get into that. But when I think about we've all been in blocky churches like this. The church, there's a church I used to lead worship at that we literally called internally a tin can because it functionally had the reverb qualities of being in it was literally a warehouse. It was 70 feet high and all concrete. It was the worst for reverb, but there was nothing beautiful about that. But I don't have either of you been to the Getty Museum in Los Angeles? It's this gorgeous, massive museum with a bunch of the blocks are from Rome, and it's just even the walls are art, and there's all these different areas and things, and the outside is gorgeous. There's massive gardens. So I just wonder, there's nothing particularly religious about the Getty. There's obviously a lot of religious paintings and stuff in it, but it's not about religion. But there's art and intention that is all this, the expertise that went into that. And I wonder if part of what we are feeling is this lack of again, there's been this kind of utilitarian, like, okay, how, like, where do we need lights? Where do we need speakers so that they don't feed back and things like that? And there's less, like, when people walk into a building, like, any room for oh, cool, unless, like, maybe our Christmas tree is up for, like, a month or whatever, like, maybe then. But, like, besides that, like, people don't have that opportunity to do, and maybe some of that's cost too.
Well, and I think pendulums swing two directions, and they always have to go to some extreme before we get correction. Yeah. And I think the Protestants in general, evangelicals specifically, rejected the cold orthodoxy that occupies many of sacred spaces. So these buildings were built with right intent, and in many cases, they spared no expense. I mean, some of them took hundreds of years to build. And along the way, I think they lost their way. It then became about projecting power. It was a combination of church and state in many of the great cathedrals of Rome, even to the rebuilding of Notre Dame in Paris. They wouldn't know the gospel at Notre Dame if it was etched on their foreheads at this point, but they have been very committed at spending billions of dollars at restoring what is, by every estimation, for them, a historical religious place.
Right.
But then again, I would say there's many boxes that they wouldn't know the gospel if it was etched on their forehead either.
Right.
So we can't just say it's about the building, but you've seen this thing go, and I don't believe in having icons. I don't believe you should go genuflect before Jesus on the cross. Jesus isn't on the cross; he's in heaven. And I don't believe you need to kiss. I've been to the Vatican many times. It's beautiful. I absolutely, and when I go there, I'm not Catholic at any level, but I am immediately inspired by a sense of awe and reverence every time I go there.
Yeah.
I really do, because it represents some of the characteristics of God in a splendor way. At the same time, I get the point, and there is a point to be had, because I was working in Albania where I was holding babies that were dying because of starvation. Then I go 90 miles across to Italy, and I see these cathedrals that cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm thinking, yeah, but who's going to feed the baby?
Yeah.
And I still haven't worked through all of that in my head yet. But, quite honestly, when I walked to the edge of the Grand Canyon, I had a similar feeling as I did when I walked into some of the great cathedrals. I'm processing it, Jason. I don't know where to go with all of that, other than to know my heart knows what my heart knows, and it made me think great thoughts.
Well, maybe like the first step is that awareness, is that it could be that, it absolutely is the case that a lot of the times when we go to make the decisions about how much money we're going to put into this building or whatever, we are not probably thinking as much about all the different other things that money could be used to do. So maybe at least we should try to be more cognizant, spend more time considering all of those things, and that might result in we have more of a balance. Maybe it's maybe we need only half this money for a building, and we're going to have a smaller, cheaper building, and we're going to have some money for the babies. Or does it go to intent?
Because I think one of the examples of Scripture is when Mary anointed the feet of Jesus with And what was the first criticism of God? You could have sold that and given it to the poor.
Right.
And Jesus said, no, she's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So, and again, this is, now I'm very publicly, Pastor Dan is publicly working through.
But he had built $1 million building in front of him, though.
Yeah,
is there a difference between that and what was happening with the perfume?
Yeah. Or if it wasn't Jesus that was being done to it, was one of the apostles, or what if it was, I don't know. There's a lot of those questions, but I think they're worth wrestling over.
Yeah.
Wrestling.
Oh, for sure.
So even in the architecture, you and I had a conversation about 4 or 5 years ago, right after you come back from Europe, one of the times you visited there, and you just kind of just held court in my office and just was talking about architecture, the placement of windows, the presence of light, the acoustics in a world that did not have sound systems and so forth. For you, that seemed to be an appreciation for how that benefited worship. Is that correct?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. Well, my primary musical instrument is voice. I mean, that's what I can play enough piano to, get myself awkwardly through a choir rehearsal, et cetera. But I say that to say this: when you walk into a cathedral, of all the things it's built to do, and there are a few things cathedrals were were deliberately designed to achieve. One of them is to amplify the human voice. Why is the voice important? Well, God spoke creation into being with his voice. He didn't build it with his hands. He said it, and he said, how will they know the gospel? How will they know unless they hear? Like we speaking, it's something we do, right? It's our species. We speak. Birds speak. Lions and tigers and bears, they speak. We make noise, and noise is important. Our God makes noise. And in Genesis, that's the first thing we hear is God made a noise, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're here. So the cathedrals amplify well noise. They amplify it well. They mix it well. It's a great space to sing in. Then you get into the stained glass, and certain cathedrals, not all cathedrals. Again, I'm no historian, but certain stained glass images are very clearly stories of taken from the gospel. I can walk around the space and I see the birth of Christ. I see a stained glass that is projecting is the image of Christ on the cross, and all, etc. And they're beautiful, and they're being illuminated by the light. Well, obviously, there's direct theology right there. The truth is The truth is light. All right, and God says that the light will illuminate truth. So stained glass, there's so many layers to it to be compelled to think through. That the stained glass is a creation from material things of the truth, the stories of the gospel, but it requires the light to shine through it for you to see it. So you see all these layers, and at that point, no one had spoken a word yet, and I'm already called to worship. Not a single person has spoken a phonated sound, but I'm already called to worship. I can hear my footsteps reverberating. I can see the stained glass. And so, I don't know, you transcend really quickly this existence. And that really, I would say that is a goal of our worship services. They are to assist you in transcending this moment into, we are, because of the work of Christ, we find ourselves immediately in the throne room of God when we invoke his name, when we say Heavenly Father.
Which I believe was part of the motivation behind, whether we're talking about the Renaissance artists or whether we're talking about the early, construction of cathedrals that largely came out of the Catholic Church or the Eastern Orthodox Church. But there was an attempt to capture a sense of majesty, which is one of the reasons I chose the word majesty as part of the service or sermon series title. But there is also
which is a word that really probably doesn't hold a lot of meaning in our Americanized Western culture.
We don't even really appreciate majesty the way we should.
I don't know that I ever hear it used anywhere outside
of church.
Church.
Yeah.
It's like I still think of like that old song, Majesty.
Worship
like
his majesty.
We don't do that song anymore, though. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
At the same time, there is a mystery.
Oh, sure.
We can't create enough majesty to adequately unveil the mystery of God.
Oh, yeah.
All we can do is approach it,
Yeah.
but we cannot unveil it.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. And this, there's research that's showing, and anecdotal as well. I'm seeing this happen in real time. There's a thirst in today's culture and generation for the mystery of God and salvation and the symbols of our faith that is being awakened in Gen Z Alpha and other generations as well, that I've never really appreciated until now. Why do you think that's happened? Is it a reaction to our over-utilitarianism? Why do you think people have a thirst for both majesty and mystery right now?
I would say that part of it is because we are created. I don't think we can ever forget that we are a product. And within that design, God said he's imprinted those things in us. Eternity is imprinted in the hearts of man. I forget how that's exactly worded, but it is a part of our design. And I don't know that at any other time in our lifetimes, how I used to hear testimonies at church, people would say, there was just a Jesus-sized hole in my heart. Nothing else could fill it, right? Until I found Jesus, and then Jesus filled that hole in my heart. That's just, rural vernacular for, there is something that only the spiritual can tap into, because we are spirit. We're flesh and spirit. And I think that we've seen the extent of all flesh in these two generations. They've seen it all. Like Solomon. Solomon had everything, right? He could ask God for anything he wanted to, and he said, "Give me wisdom." And in that wisdom, Solomon had all the women he wanted. He had all the best food he could possibly eat. He had all the best wines he could possibly drink. He had all the animals. Had all the palaces. He explored every possible pleasure available to the flesh. And at the end of it all, he said,
Vanity,
it's
always
vanity.
vanity.
It did not satisfy me. Well, I mean, my gosh, all I have to do is look at some of the students in my classroom at the high school I teach at. They've got the latest sneakers, the latest iPad, the latest phones. They're coming into the parking lot in Teslas and brand new Broncos. They're having food delivered to them at the school from Uber Eats. I mean, they're living the life of Solomon in many ways. They're living the life. They have everything, and they don't even realize they have everything. They have everything. Their book bags are clean. Their computers are the latest MacBook Pros. They have everything, and they are as dissatisfied as Solomon. Why? Because that's spiritual peace, the mystery, the majesty, the sacred. We have fed our flesh to all. We have seen the extent of feeding the flesh, and it still leaves us hungry. Yeah. And I don't know that there's been a more prosperous generation in our lifetimes as the current two you just named. They got everything. Yep. Metaverse, they're living. I used to watch Star Trek, and they'd go into the holodeck. My kids have holodeck now. They've got things we could only have dreamed of back in the day. Yeah. So, and they're left dissatisfied every night.
Yeah. Sure.
So my mind went a different direction. We asked, like, why are young people seeming to crave mystery? And I wonder if something that I feel like I do know about young people is that they do crave authenticity. I think part of the reason why, like at ERI, like our dialect style works particularly well is because it's meant to be very, very authentic. There's no like cards up the sleeve. There's no like apologetics trick about to get sprung on this person, and that work. And young people really want authenticity. They're looking for, like, I heard psychologically it's been shown that like they are more skeptical than any generation in the past. Like marketers, like the Mad Men type, like they have a harder time penetrating this audience because it's harder to like get them to like, oh, if I show you this thing, then maybe you'll then think this other thing. Like they're like, I don't know, I don't want you to be fooling me about anything. So like it's harder. So it occurs to me that if it's true that young people care a lot about authenticity, then as we try to find answers to the toughest questions, well, in my experience, the answers to the toughest questions aren't as clear cut as my Sunday school teachers led me to believe at one time. And ultimately, a lot of times the wisest, Christians that I know will eventually at some point kind of say like, here are some ideas, but then some of this is mysterious. And I don't know if we can completely get there. And so maybe young people are accepting that there's got to be some level of mystery. Now, like for me, if you punt to mystery too soon, I'm like, I feel like I don't know, like it can be like can feel like a cheap way out real quick. But there is mystery. If we can't fully understand God, then that's going to make sense. So I feel like it makes sense to me that young people would be looking more for mystery if their pendulum swinging away from sort of a version of Christianity that was like, we have all the answers. You don't have to worry about it. We're the smartest. And then we still see young people like walking away from the church in droves.
Yeah. And I mean, we're all in a search for certainty because certainty provides security. But certainty also requires certainty becomes finite at some level. Yeah. You reach the last level of the video game and then it's over. That's not the way it works with God. There is no end game. There is no complete. There is and so the pursuit of God is mysterious in that it is never over, and it cannot be over for us because we are finite and He is infinite. And that's why we're called to worship. We're called to pursue God. And he has pursued us.
He has pursued us, and he has called us to pursue him on his term. He does
on his
have terms.
Yeah, he does. And we don't pursue him unless he calls us. That's the other thing Scripture tells us.
I think that the church's measured reaction to this sudden interest in what we're calling mystery by particular generations should include the admittance that mystery exists within the unholy as well.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's a good point.
as these generations are suddenly seeking to transcend this physical existence, because I don't know that they value authenticity. I mean, I know they value authenticity, but I don't think it's as plain and simple as that. When I'm in a room full of ninth graders, I feel like their number one value is not authenticity. But I do believe that they've been raised to where words have less meaning than they have an agenda. And so I guess that's where I will choose whatever words I have to choose to achieve my agenda, but I may not be using the words accurately.
Yeah. But no,
I want that reaction from
yeah.
you, so I'm using words, and I think that that's where you're speaking of. They've been raised to know there's always an ulterior motive somewhere. Dad says at the altar he's going to love mom until the day he dies, but what he actually meant is he's going to love mom until he just doesn't like her anymore. And and the church says this, and the government says this, and the teacher says this. The teacher tells me that it's important that I make good grades, but the teacher doesn't put the grades in the grade book for up to a month. So they see all these words that aren't followed by action, and that's age old. So the church needs to know that they are looking for, there has to be more to life. Yeah. This is a recapitulation of history. So they'll go into the mysterious, but guess who's waiting in the shadows along with Jesus? It's he who poses as an angel of light, because it's a great time for him as well. And I do believe in the devil. I do believe in the unholy. I do believe that there is wicked as well as good. And so the church must not just simply celebrate, yay, everybody's open to God again. Well, the spiritual realm's always been open to God, and there's a lot of gods. Mm-hmm. So we've got to be ready to have these authentic conversations in a way, like you said, your ministry does, that makes, we can't use a bunch of churchese, but it must be training them in the truth. We've got to get back to doctrine.
It's always, always, always about the truth. What is really real?
Yeah.
Great metaphysical question. We are way out of time, but I want to say this has been great. If you have not listened to the previous 2 episodes, go back and listen to them. And Jason, I'm already going on record. I'm going to get you back. He's always so reticent to come to these, and then when he gets there, he just blossoms, and so is it. But what I do urge you to do, if you're listening to this in real time, in terms of when they're released, come to Life Fellowship if you live in our area, and we begin on October 19th. Is it 19th or 16th? 19th. Yeah. October 19th, our first Sunday in this series. It continues up till Christmas. And get a taste. Get a taste. Come with open heart, open hands, open mind, and say, God, I want to get to know you better. I want to know truth, but I want to know you. And I think God will do something in your heart that is completely outside of our ability to manufacture it. But at the same time, we want to use the positions that God has given us and assigned to us to make you think, to make you look, to make you search, to make you listen for what God may be saying in your life through his word and under the direction of his Holy Spirit. We love the fact that you're listening to Life Talks. We hope you'll continue to do so. You can always contact us at lifetalks@lifecharlotte.com. Until next time, thanks as always for joining us here at Life Talks.